In episode 9, Alfie doesn't have much time to be on the mend because his friends stop by the next day to see how he's doing, but more importantly, to get help with Stormcloud. The deadline is quickly approaching. They realize that they need to do something about it, and that something is sneaking into the Raven Union's office and just stealing it. Alfie's mom is completely against it. She doesn't want her son to be in any more harm's way. Combine that with the fact that Alfie does call it a suicide mission, she's really against it. But Alfie says, I thought it was a suicide mission before I got involved. But even despite her best efforts, Alfie is in. So it's going to be Alfie, Thomas Wayne, Dave Boy, and Professor Fox. Thomas Wayne figures that he can get them in because he's still a U.S. diplomat. And with the U.S. back in the Ravens, it shouldn't be an issue. They're going to pose as bringing Fox back. Then they just have to sneak in, find the location of Stormcloud, steal it, and get out without anyone noticing. But even though Alfie is involved now, it really doesn't make it any less dangerous. They're literally sneaking into enemy territory. And at this point, Alfie's face is pretty famous. It's very likely that he could get recognized and caught. So he wants to make good on something. That night, he stops by Sandra's home and apologizes to her. He tells her that he's going on this job the next day and he's scared. He doesn't want to be alone. She figures it's a line, but he says, no, Sandra, it's true. To Sandra, though, that's not enough. So he looks her in the eye and says, I'm sorry that I love you too much to not let you down. We could have kids and all that, and I know I'd be very happy. But one day I'd up and leave you and break your heart. Then I'd be ashamed for the rest of my life. But Alfie used the L word, and that works. So he heads in, and him and Sandra do the damn thing one last time, and Alfie doesn't have to spend the night alone. Dave Boy and Fox spent the night drinking with Aziz, and Thomas Wayne spent the night banging on Martha's door, begging her to marry him. When she asks why he wants to marry her so badly, he says, because I love you, why else? And she tells him, I guess I love you too. So this is a big episode for love. But even with that out of the way, it's not as simple for Martha. So Thomas tells her, well, let me make it more simple for you. I'm going on a mission where I might not come back. So if I don't come back, do you want to be able to say something nice to our kid about me? Or will you have to say that I asked you to marry me and you said no? Martha concedes the fact that Thomas has a point. And while it's not a yes, it's also not a no. But Thomas will take it at this point because it's just progress. And the enemy? Well, Salt spent the night getting a phone call from Vicky. He's unaware of the fact that Vicky is being held at knife point by the Sykes sisters, who are trying to lure Salt to them, but it doesn't work. He's just too busy. So through Bet's urging, Vicky is able to procure an invitation to him. So the next day, the Sykes sisters, along with Vicky, are going to be heading into the Raven Union's headquarters, and they'll have their face-to-face with Salt, hopefully. The next day, the group of Alfie, Thomas, Fox, and Dave Boy head over to the Raven Union. They're able to easily get in using the American disguise. And when they get in the elevator, they take out all of the Raven Union guards. Fox then puts the key into the basement where they created Stormcloud, and the group is now in phase 2 of the mission. The other scientists are pretty surprised to see Fox back. And before he steals it, Fox reams them all out for doing what they're doing, creating such a device as Stormcloud. Now, Fox has to be very, very careful with Stormcloud. It's the only one of its kind. They don't have any backups, but the device is in basically a little tiny light bulb, and if it gets destroyed, everybody in a 5-mile radius dies. So in order to keep the device secure and safe, Alfie has brought a tin. It looks like a tobacco tin. Nothing but the best. They then move on to phase 3 of the plan, getting the hell out of there. They take the elevator up, and they're almost out of the building when they're caught. Because when Salt found out that the CIA station chief was in the building, he decided he wanted to go meet him. But he saw all the bodies in the elevator and he knew something was up. So the Raven Union is quickly able to surround them, take back Stormcloud, and put them in jail. A little while later, Alfie ends up calling up Aziz while Salt holds the phone up for him and telling Aziz what happened to him. Salt then hops on the phone and reminds Aziz that he has until 4 p.m. for the deadline. If he doesn't hear back from him, they're using Stormcloud on London. Salt then starts beating the hell out of Alfie with the telephone, and he doesn't really care too much when Thomas Wayne brings up the fact that Alfie has, quote, rights. Salt just shoots back, well, I'm violating them. Unfortunately for the group, there's nothing they can do. They're all locked up in cages, so the best that they can do to help Alfie is by yelling at Salt, and it's not working. Salt, however, thinks he might be able to use Alfie. He takes him up to his penthouse suite, and he starts pitching Alfie on coming to work for the Raven Union. Salt kind of figured this would happen, so he leaves the room, and that's when Mr. Pennyworth wheels himself in. Alfie's so shocked at first he figures it's a dream, but his dad yells at him, "It's not a dream." And then he runs into him to prove the fact that he's not a dream. Alfie tells his father, "I'm happy to see you, but Mom has been grieving about you ever since you died, or allegedly. She was broken, and all the while you're just rolling around up here happy as a clam." Mr. Pennyworth admits that he missed his wife terribly, but he just didn't want her to see him like this. And Alfie doesn't understand what he's talking about, as he asks his father, "Like what? Alive? Mom would want to see you, despite all that you've done." But Mr. Pennyworth just doesn't think that his wife would forgive him. And Alfie assures him, "Oh, she would. She's too kind." But then Alfie gets to the point of why he's actually there. He asks his father, "You know they're going to drop a terror bomb on your wife, right?" And the way Mr. Pennyworth looks at it, it's a great sacrifice for an amazing cause. And that's when Alfie just starts yelling at his father about how arrogant, how narrow-minded he is. And when Mr. Pennyworth asks Alfie to join him on the Raven Union side, Alfie gets even angrier. It's clear that Alfie is currently in a fit of rage, even though he's tied up, so Mr. Pennyworth just leaves the room. A little while later, Alfie is escorted back down to the prison, and he fills everybody in on the fact that his dad is alive and well. Fox, though, can't figure out why Salt did what he did, meeting with Alfie and then letting Alfie meet with his father. As he tells the group, Salt doesn't do things for sentimental reasons. He's definitely got a plan. Fox just can't figure out what it is. And while getting Alfie on the side was the initial plan, Salt knew that it was a long shot, so they have to go to the backup plan. The backup plan is going to be using Mr. Pennyworth to deploy Stormcloud, sacrificing himself for the betterment of the cause, and ultimately winning the Raven Union the war. But as the guys are just sitting in the cell, waiting to find out what the Raven Union is going to do to him, Alfie's surprised because he sees Bet. Bet, Vicky, and Peg were able to sneak into the facility thanks to Vicky. She's pretty recognizable there. Peg and Bet just pretended like they were a couple of other girls for Salt. They made their way down, they found Frances Gaunt, they apologized for Hardwood, and they proceeded to try to get her out of there. But Alfie stops Bet, and Bet immediately recognizes him as Esme's fiancé. Bet unlocks the cages for all four guys, but before the Psych sisters leave, Alfie asks, "Hey, can you guys spare a weapon? We really need it. We're trying to stop a terrible war crime here." And right away, Frances Gaunt knows what he's talking about, but the Psych sisters really don't care. So Alfie plays to Bet's heart. He says, "Bet, what would Esme do?" And that's enough for Bet to wait for a guard to walk around the corner, pistol whip him, and steal his weapon for Alfie. The women then start trying to make their way to Salt, and they're caught by a guard, but the guard, just like seemingly everybody else, recognizes Vicky, so he escorts them up to the penthouse. Alfie and his group are also caught trying to leave. And before Salt can even see the Psych sisters or his girlfriend, he has Alfie and his group brought in front of him, because he's actually pretty impressed by the fact that they just keep coming back. With Mr. Pennyworth in the corner, his son pleads for him to see the light. He asks his dad, "Can't you see that this guy's nuts?" The Raven Union guards, though, start beating on Alfie to shut him up, and that's when Salt tells all of them that there is a bright side to this, because all four of the guys have something to offer. He starts off with Dr. Fox. He suggests that he get back in the lab and start working for them, but Dr. Fox says no. He then looks at Thomas Wayne and says, "Well, you could make a great bargaining chip. You could make a detailed statement," but Thomas cuts him off and says no. He then looks at Dave Boy and says, "Well, you would make a great soldier," but Dave Boy says absolutely not. But before Salt can get to Alfie, Mr. Pennyworth asks Salt, "Can I have some time alone to have some words with my son? Maybe I can persuade him to see some sense come over to our side." And considering the fact that Mr. Pennyworth is about to sacrifice himself for the betterment of the Raven Union, Salt says, "Yeah, that's fine." And then he leaves the room. But when Mr. Pennyworth wheels over to his son, Alfie tells him, "Don't waste your time." Mr. Pennyworth, though, says, "Alfie, do you really think your mother would forgive me?" And Alfie once again says, "Yes." So Mr. Pennyworth whispers to Alfie that there's a gun in his left pocket, and Alfie grabs it and shoots the rest of the guards. The idea of being reunited with his wife, who he misses dearly and loves, was just too much for Mr. Pennyworth. So right as it seemed absolutely bleak, and I'm talking the queen is left and Aziz is waiting to die, he gets a phone call from Alfie. who fills him in on the fact that they're heading back and they've got Stormcloud. But they've also got Mr. Pennyworth strapped into the car, looking forward to being reunited with his wife. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.